Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it.
Samantha was on her way home for vacation in her small town, which was located near Dallas. The girl was in her third year at an economic institute and dreamed of becoming an accountant in the future. Samantha anticipated the joy of meeting her parents, and she also thought about how she would tell her mother and father that they would soon become grandparents. As soon as the girl thought about her pregnancy, her face frowned. Samantha found out about it a week ago, and at first she was happy about the event. The girl immediately decided to notify her chosen one that he would soon become a father. With a young man Samantha met at the skating rink in Dallas, she accidentally ran over a guy and knocked him down while skating. 25-year-old Steve found himself on the ice laughing from this fall, and the girl was embarrassed that she had so ridiculously run over the man. Steve, seeing Samantha's embarrassment, said cheekily, "Why are you blushing like a shy girl? Not everyone here is an excellent skater, and quite often there are such collisions on the ice. Better let's get up and skate together. It's my first time here, although I am from this city. It's my third time here. My classmate invited me once. I went and liked it, so I come here occasionally," Samantha said, getting to her feet. "So you study here? A student, I take it," the boy said with a smile. "That's right. Soon there will be one more accountant in the country," said the girl. After that, the young people got acquainted, and after the skating rink, they sat in a cozy cafe and talked nicely. Since then, they called each other for a few days and then started to meet. A month after meeting, the girl realized that she fell in love with the young man, and soon they had a passionate night in the arms. Samantha then often stayed overnight at Steve's place. His mother, Natalie, on these relationships, looked through her fingers. The woman did not believe that her son was serious about this girl. She was just waiting for Steve to play with the student and then leave her. It had already happened a couple of times in his life. And so just a week before Samantha to go home, then the girl found out that she was pregnant. A few days before this news, Samantha had already agreed with her lover that they would go together to her parents. But it was only worth it for the girl to inform the guy about the pregnancy, as Steve gave a bunch of reasons about the fact that he could not go. And also the young man casually said, "You think about terminating the pregnancy, you need to learn first, and only then think about offspring." At that moment, the girl erupted with indignation and almost hysterically screamed, "Are you saying that you don't need our child with you? Maybe you don't need me either. Let's not have this cheap drama. We're not in the theater. I just let you know that I'm not ready to become a father yet. I need to wait a little longer," Steve said with a little irritation. "You know what it's called. I mean your behavior at the moment. It's hit it and quit it," Samantha said, holding back tears. "Look, baby, let's not fight. You'll go to your family, get some rest, and then you'll think it over. I'm just telling you that you caught me off guard with your pregnancy announcement, and I really don't think I'm ready to be a father at this point in my life," Steve said. "You're going to be a great dad, I know you are. You were just not ready for such a turn of events," said the girl, who thought that she had shocked the young man with the news of her pregnancy, and therefore the lover had such a reaction. And now Samantha was going home by train and thought about how to tell her parents about the pregnancy. She was well aware that at home they would start asking about the father of the future child, and she had nothing to say in response, because she did not know the decision of her boyfriend. The girl was right. As soon as she came to her parents and reported the pregnancy, then the mother, Leslie, immediately asked a few questions. "Who is your boyfriend? How many years? When is the wedding?" "Mom, so many questions that you do not know which one to answer first," quietly said the girl. "And you in order and do not rush. After all, my father and I are worried about you," said the mother. "Mammy, we can talk about this topic alone," Samantha said even more quietly. Leslie frowned after these words. She already felt anxious for her daughter. The woman saw how her husband wanted to get indignant, so she asked him affectionately to let him talk to Samantha alone. The girl's father, Jack, did not object to his spouse and silently left the room. As soon as the door closed behind the man, Leslie looked expectantly at her daughter. Samantha saw the look of her mother and did not delay the conversation and quietly said, "Mammy, I do not know how to tell you. In general, I'll tell you how it is. I got pregnant from my favorite man, but he is not ready to become a father. I gave him time to think about it while I'm with you." "What do you mean he's not ready? Jumping and tumbling in bed with you means you're ready. I don't understand you, daughter, frankly. You have to realize that time is running out and your due date is getting longer every day. I'm saying that you can terminate a pregnancy up to a certain point," said the mother. "Mom, I'm gonna have a baby. I'm not going to terminate the pregnancy. I'm just sure that even if Steve refuses the baby now, he will definitely, as soon as the baby is born and he looks at it, he will come back to me," said the girl. "What a fool you are," Leslie said sadly, and after a few minutes of silence continued talking. "It is impossible to tie a man to yourself with a child. You have to decide for yourself. You need a child or not. In any case, do not mean to give birth for someone else. You need to realize that you want this baby and ready to bring him up due to different circumstances yourself. I will give birth. And despite everything, I believe that Steve will be with me," said the girl with pressure. "Well, that's your decision. I'm not the boss of you, and I'm not going to push you around. Under any circumstances, my father and I will be happy to hold a grandson or granddaughter." "Don't worry about Daddy. I'll explain everything to him," said Leslie. "Thanks, Mom. You supported me a lot now, but I didn't expect anything else from you," said the girl with tears in her eyes. The vacations flew by, and Samantha left her parents for her studies. The girl hoped that the guy would think over everything during this time and would be happy about the baby. However, her expectations were not justified. As soon as she met with the young man, Steve immediately said that they would not meet again. The girl looked perplexed at her lover, and he in turn said that he no longer had feelings for Samantha. After this brief conversation, the young woman came to her senses for a long time. She could not believe that the chosen one so simply, without any apparent reason, took her and left her. Samantha experienced the breakup for several days, and then decided that so easily will not let the guy forget about her. The girl dared to talk to Steve's mother. She thought Natalie would influence her son. And soon Samantha was sitting at the guy's house and talking to the landlady. The girl deliberately seized the moment when the chosen one was not at home. Samantha told Natalie about the pregnancy and the fact that Steve had turned away from her. The boyfriend's mother listened to the girl and calmly said, "Why did you come here? I did not put you in bed with my son, and you know very well that after bedding there can be children. As they say, I didn't set you up, and I didn't divorce you. And now, if my son is cold to you, it's not in my power to make him feel for you again. But you must talk to him, because I am carrying his child under my heart and your grandson or granddaughter," said the girl. "Wait, my dear. You can't claim that it is my son's child, so don't attribute to me the kinship with your unborn child. And lastly, I'll ask you not to bother me with your visits anymore. I hope I have made myself clear to you," Natalie said haughtily. "Yes, how dare you say that to me? You've seen that I've spent many nights at your place," Samantha said indignantly. "I don't argue, but who slept with you the other nights?" The landlady smirked and looked at the girl with a contemptuous look and said, "I hope we won't see you again." After these words, Samantha ran out of the apartment. She felt that she was going to cry from helplessness. And only when Samantha returned to the dormitory, she gave herself the freedom of emotion. She hugged her pillow and cried. Several months flew by. During this period of time, Samantha repeatedly tried to talk to Steve, but the man behaved coldly and sometimes hostile towards her. All this the girl silently bore, She hoped in her heart that as soon as the baby is born, the lover will stop treating her like this. So Samantha went on maternity leave, took a leave of absence, and went to her parents, as in this city could not stay, because it was necessary to rent an apartment, and the girl had no extra money for this luxury. However, leaving home, she decided that as soon as she gave birth, she would come to Steve again with the baby. The sex of the child at that time, Samantha already knew. It wasn't long before the young woman gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Julia. Samantha gently looked at her daughter, noting that the baby looks very much like her lover. The girl was happy about this circumstance. She thought that Steve would not be able to push away Julia, who looked like two drops like him. Samantha told her mother about it. Leslie, when she heard it, said, "I thought you'd wise up. Julia may look like her biological father, but that has no bearing on the guy wanting to live for his daughter with you. I'm pretty sure Steve and I are gonna be together. And when Julia is 3 months old, we will go to her father's house," the young woman said. Leslie said nothing in response, as she saw that it was useless to dissuade her daughter. The woman decided to let Samantha be convinced by her bitter experience, and maybe then her life would teach her something. When Julia was 3 months old, Samantha packed for Dallas. She sacredly believed that now she would definitely reunite with the man she loved. However, a disappointment awaited the young woman. Steve, as soon as he saw Samantha with a child in his arms on the threshold of the apartment, he immediately declared that it was not his daughter. Samantha was angered by these words and said that she would establish paternity in court. The man, hearing the words of the ex-girlfriend, Riley uttered, "Go ahead and with a song. But only you will make an examination, then I can tell you right away that then I will put all the money and connections to deprive you of motherhood. And believe me, I can do it. Now the choice is yours. You have 2 choices, and I'm going to tell you what they are. First, you leave now and forget the way here, and also forget about my coexistence, as well as I about yours. And the second option is that you may go to court, the consequences of which I have already told you afterwards." "You rascal," exclaimed the girl. "How? Only a few minutes ago said words of love, and now you call me names. You have no right to be misunderstood. And if I am a scoundrel, then why did you tumble in bed with me then?" said the man with a grin. "I hate you," said the young woman. Samantha returned home in a depressed state. She thought about Steve's words about the trial. She wondered to herself whether the guy was bluffing about the deprivation of motherhood or not. As soon as the young woman arrived home, she told her mother about everything. Leslie, after telling her daughter, hugged Samantha and advised her to forget the former chosen one and never remember about him. However, the girl bitterly said, "I am now gnawing with resentment, and I cannot just leave this situation. After all, in fact, Steve accused me of being a slutty girl. I want to prove to him and his mom that I'm not. Specifically, a paternity test. Look, sweet girl, I know you're emotional after this, but you need to find the strength to just forget about that guy. And what if he will carry out his threat and you will lose your daughter, especially you said that his mother works in the administration? Just think about it. Is it worth it?" "I wouldn't do it if I were you," Leslie said. Samantha thought about her mother's words and then looked at Julia, who was sleeping peacefully in the children's bed. She thought about what her mother had said for a long time and finally came to the conclusion that it was not worth stirring up a hornet's nest. Samantha decided that she would simply cross out of the memory of her former lover once and for all. Time moved on, and soon Samantha's sabbatical was coming to an end. The girl's mother offered her daughter to resume her studies. Samantha looked at her mother, perplexed at that moment, and asked, "What about Julia? She is still just a baby, isn't she?" "Don't worry about Julia. I am retired, and I will be able to babysit her. But you will come here more often. Why should you waste your time? You don't have much time left before graduation," said Leslie. "But in principle, your mom is right. I'll finish my studies and get a job. We could use an extra penny now, said the girl. Samantha returned to the institute. She called home almost every day to find out how Julia was doing. The young woman missed her daughter very much and dreamed of graduating as soon as possible in order to return home to her baby. Samantha rarely thought about Steve, and when she arrived in Dallas, she did not even try to make him. Time flew by and Samantha was triumphantly returning home. She had graduated, and now she planned to get a job in the near future. As soon as she arrived home, she hugged her little girl and said, "You are growing by leaps and bounds. How glad I am that now you will be near your mother." After these words, Samantha looked at her mother and saw her red eyes. The girl asked anxiously, "Have you been crying?" "We have Daddy in the hospital. They took him away by ambulance last night. The doctors say he doesn't have long to live," Leslie said through her tears. "What's wrong with him?" "He's never complained about his health," said Samantha. "He's been complaining about chest pains lately, and I've been chasing him to the hospital, but he's as stubborn as you are. Yesterday, he had a seizure, and I called an ambulance. I went with Julia to see him this morning, but they wouldn't let me see my husband," the woman said. "Mom, please don't worry. Everything will be fine. You just have to believe in it. Our daddy is strong, and at Julia's wedding he'll go out. And doctors can be wrong in their diagnosis." Trying not to cry, said the girl, who was stunned by the news of her mother. 2 days later, Leslie's husband died in the hospital. Then the funeral took place. The widow was sobbing in the cemetery, her daughter comforting her as best she could. Samantha realized that now there was nothing she could do to help her mother cope with grief, and she herself felt the loss of her father very much. It had been a month since the funeral, and Leslie had aged a great deal during that period of time. Samantha knew that her mother had given up because of her husband's death. The girl tried to cheer up her mom, but she only smiled sadly in response. Soon Samantha got a job as an accountant in a small firm. The young woman wanted to work on her specialty in the bank, but all the places that there were staffed. The girl did not become upset about this and decided first to gain practice and eventually moved to work in a public institution. And now Julia was 3 years old, and Samantha gave the girl to a kindergarten so that her daughter would have contact with her peers. Leslie was against it. The woman wanted her granddaughter to stay at home for some time. But Samantha stood her ground that Julia needed to socialize with other children. A year passed. As Julia went to kindergarten, the girl was taken from the institution alternately by her grandmother and mother. But lately, Leslie noticed that Samantha more and more often asks to take the child to her. And then the pensioner noticed that her daughter was often late at work. She asked Samantha, "Why have you been coming late from work lately?" "We have a lot of reporting to do, and I have to stay late," she said. "But you didn't have that before," Leslie said, perplexed. "Mom, don't forget that times are changing and life is getting more complicated," Samantha said. 2 weeks after this conversation, Leslie was walking home with her granddaughter from kindergarten when suddenly Julia shouted, "Here comes my mom." The woman looked at the girl, who was pointing with her hand to the sidewalk across the driveway. Indeed, Leslie saw her daughter walking hand in hand with a man. The woman smiled. Now she understood her daughter's delays at work. Only one thing annoyed the mother, that Samantha was hiding her relationship from her. Soon the grandmother and her granddaughter returned home, and Leslie waited impatiently for her daughter. She wanted to talk to her, and as soon as the young woman entered the house, then her mother turned to her with a question. "Is it another emergency at work?" "As always," calmly said the girl. "Daughter, and when did you learn to deceive your mother?" With a smile said the old woman. "What do you mean deceive?" Samantha answered with a question. But then Julia intervened in the conversation between the two women and shouted excitedly, "Mammy and grandmother, and I saw you. You were walking with your uncle on your arm. I wanted to run to you, but my grandmother did not let me. I was still offended at her then. Leslie looked at Samantha with the same smile. The young woman was confused. She understood her mother's question about cheating perfectly now. Samantha told her mother that she would explain everything a little later. Leslie nodded in response and went to heat up dinner to feed everyone. The conversation between the two women didn't happen until after Julia went to bed. Samantha looked at her mom and informed her that she had a man courting her. Leslie was overjoyed at the news and replied to her daughter that it was high time she had a personal life. Samantha looked thoughtfully at her mom and spoke softly. "I don't love that man." "Then why are you going out with him?" The landlady said, perplexed. "He gives me money. Didn't you notice that last month I didn't pay Julia for the children's corner in installments?" Samantha said. "Are you crazy? How can you sell yourself? I already wanted to tell you that you sometimes spoil Julia with your gifts. I raised you without a cubbyhole, and Julia doesn't really need one. I'm begging you, daughter, to end this relationship. You need to respect and appreciate yourself. Believe me that you will meet your happiness in life, but you shouldn't waste on trifles," Leslie said sadly, who was really shocked by her daughter's message. "Mom, the years are flying by and I'm all alone. It seems to me that I will never love anyone," almost crying said the girl. "Ah, well, stop your nonsense. Why do you write yourself in the old women? Everything will work out for you. But stop selling yourself. God forbid Julia finds out about it," said the old woman sternly. "Okay, Mom, let's stop talking about this. I promise that I will not meet with this man, because I myself from this relationship is disgusting. I just hoped that in time I could love a man, but it did not happen," quietly said the young woman. A few days later, Leslie noticed that her daughter really stopped working late. The older woman sighed with relief. She wanted Samantha to be happy, but not like this. Time moved forward, and Julia went to the first grade, and a month before this event, Samantha went to work at the bank. The woman was happy about this event, as she dreamed of working in a government organization. Samantha was happy with everything in her life, except for one thing: she did not have a man. The woman tried to get together with a young man who was 4 years younger than her. However, after a month the guy cheated on her, and Samantha broke off the relationship with him without regret. Once the girl returned home, and she received a call from her daughter's class teacher, Selena, who asked her to come to school tomorrow. Samantha asked the teacher what was the matter, but the interlocutor said that it was not a telephone conversation. Samantha came home and went straight to her daughter. "Julia, did you do something wrong at school?" "No," said the girl sullenly. "You're lying to me. Quickly answer why I am called to school," the woman said sternly. "I don't know," said the daughter with a sullen look. Leslie intervened in the conversation and asked Samantha to calm down. The woman turned to her granddaughter and asked her to go to the nursery. As soon as the child came out, the landlady told Samantha, "You are not behaving properly towards your daughter. Don't you see that on the one hand you spoil her with things and toys, and on the other hand, you don't even try to communicate with your daughter? You are not a child anymore, and you should realize that Julia lacks your attention. She doesn't just need your gifts, she needs companionship." "Mom, why don't you tell me how to raise my own daughter? I'll figure it out myself," said the young woman irritably. "Well, I will not, but then do not cry if your daughter closes. That's when I will not be able to help you with advice, because you will lose time. Do as you see fit," Leslie said sadly. The woman saw that her daughter had just gone to work and was buying off Julia with gifts so that she wouldn't have to spend time with her. The next morning, Samantha called to work and said that she would be late, and then went to school with her daughter. The woman and child walked into Julia's classroom, where they were greeted by the classroom teacher. Selena escorted the children out of the classroom and asked the parent if the girl had told her about yesterday's incident. Samantha shook her head negatively, and then the teacher said, "Yesterday your daughter at recess cut with scissors the textbooks and notebooks of one of the students, The girl's name is Mallory. You realize that's nonsense, don't you? And what makes you think Julia did it? Samantha said. When Julia did it, a student came into the classroom and witnessed the incident. You need to have a serious talk with your daughter, first of all. And you need to apologize to the parents of the girl who was hurt and to the child herself. That's two. And lastly, you are well aware that your girl has committed a misdemeanor. She has damaged someone else's property, and you need to compensate for it, said the teacher. I heard you, but it is worth to understand. I am interested in the reason for this act. Maybe my daughter decided to take revenge on Mallory. Julia couldn't just do it without a reason, and I'd like to hear it from you, Samantha said discreetly. I think you should ask your daughter. You're her mother, not me, Selena said. Don't poke me in my parental duties. This incident didn't happen at my house. It happened in your classroom when you were in charge of the children. And the first thing you should have done was to ask Julia the reason for it. And I understand that you didn't do it, she said reproachfully. Samantha, I didn't call you here to exchange barbs. I told you about your daughter's behavior. And one more thing, I talked to both girls after that, but they don't say anything. I have nothing more to say to you, Selena said. Samantha left the school in a bad mood. She wished that the working day would be over as soon as possible. She wanted to talk to her daughter. Samantha couldn't understand how Julia could do that. She was a kind and sympathetic girl. The workday was over, and the woman walked home with a quick step. In her mind, Samantha went over the options of how she would start a conversation with her daughter. When she got home, she still hadn't figured out where to start the conversation. As soon as Samantha entered the apartment, she asked her mother what Julia had told her after school today. Leslie replied that her granddaughter refused to engage in dialogue at all. Samantha went into her daughter's room and saw that the girl was drawing at the table. The mother turned to the girl. I didn't have time to talk to you at school today, so we'll do it right now. Let me know why you cut your classmates' textbooks and notebooks. Julia continued to draw without reacting to her mother's words. Such ignorant behavior infuriated the woman, and she'd already in raised tones spoke out. I'm not talking to the wall, I'm talking to you. If you have committed a disgusting act, you should be responsible for it. So be reasonable and answer my question. I don't like that Mallory. She's always bragging about how her parents buy her everything. I got tired of listening to her, so I shut her up. And since her parents are so rich, they'll buy her books and notebooks again, the daughter said calmly. Wait, but it's just monstrous to ruin other people's things for such a stupid reason. Can you imagine that someone else doesn't like you either, and they will do the same to you? You embarrassed me in front of that girl's parents. Listen to me, I have coworkers at work that I don't like, but I don't break their laptops or anything. Let's agree so before you want to create a deed, then initially you will turn either to me or to the grandmother and will not make decisions on your own. I'll have to spend some money on your classmate because of your stupid act. And you also promise me right now that tomorrow you will apologize to this Mallory, said the mother of the daughter. Okay, the girl mumbled. Samantha went out into the hall, where she saw her mother, who had perfectly heard the whole short conversation between her daughter and Julia. Leslie came up to Samantha and said that she was good, as she found the right words for the child. The girl thanked her mother for the praise, and then wondered if maybe she was actually not giving her child enough time. From that day on, the woman decided that now she would try to talk to her daughter as often as possible. Several years passed. During this period, Samantha had another affair with a man, which lasted no more than 6 months. At first, the woman was happy with this man, but then, as it turned out, the man was a gambler. Initially, the girl did not pay attention that the chosen one was spending money in the casino, but when he began to demand finances from her, she immediately pointed the man at the door. When Julia was in the 7th grade, then Leslie fell ill. The elderly woman was admitted to the hospital. As it turned out, she had a heart attack. Samantha at that point in time was torn between work, going to the hospital, and household duties. The woman felt that at this rate, she would soon be exhausted, both mentally and physically. Samantha turned to her daughter for help. "Julia, you're not a little kid anymore. You can see that Mom is exhausted. I have to gallop home from work to prepare food for my grandmother and bring it to her. The food at the hospital is disgusting, and then I have to wash the dishes and eat and other duties. Let you help me with the household chores. You should have done it long ago, but your grandmother always felt sorry for you." "Mom, but you are so interesting, and when will I go out then?" Julia asked unhappily. "You have to know how to allocate your time. In general, your duties include washing the dishes, walking the dog. And in general, the dog was taken at your whim, and grandmother or I had to take care of it. From now on, we're changing our life a little bit. You won't laze around anymore," said Samantha. "Why don't you ask my opinion? Don't I have a say?" "Grandmother, if she were here now, would definitely take my side," said Julia. "So stop bickering with your mother. You will do as I say," said the woman. The next day, Samantha came home from work to find her daughter gone and a dirty plate in the sink. The woman frowned, because when she left for work, she never left dirty dishes behind. That meant that Julia had come from school, eaten, and hadn't cleaned her plate after her. Samantha entered her daughter's room and saw that the child was also ignoring the fact that she had asked to put things in the closet from the morning. Samantha followed into the kitchen to boil her mother some dumplings to take to the hospital. The woman mentally scolded her daughter as she cooked and thought of ways to punish her. Soon Samantha was already sitting in Leslie's room and talking to her. The older woman was asking about her granddaughter and how she was doing. Samantha wanted to tell her mother that Julia was completely out of control, but restrained herself because her mother should not be worried. In the evening of the same day, Samantha sat on the couch and waited for her daughter to return. As soon as Julia entered, the woman said in an icy tone, "I understand that I am not your boss and you completely ignore my words. Well, we'll do the same to you. I won't give you money for small expenses. If you want to eat at school, bring your own food, which you'll make yourself." "Mom, I just forgot what I have to do. No more packed lunches. That's so last century. Tomorrow, I'll do everything. You'll see. Just give me the money," said Julia capriciously. "All right, let it be your way. Tomorrow, I'll give you the money," said her mother. For the first 3 days after this conversation, Julia fulfilled her mother's duties, but then she started to ignore her mother's tasks again. Samantha did not bother her daughter anymore, but simply left Julia no money. And on the same day, the daughter resentfully told her mother that she would tell her grandmother everything. Samantha wanted to yell at the child, but stopped herself in time and said, "Just dare to do it. The grandmother must not worry at all. You have to realize that any anxiety could give her another heart attack. So if you want to get money, you must do your chores like a diligent child." Julia sullenly remained silent in response and only asked her mother when her grandmother would be discharged. Samantha replied that it would be in a couple of days. As soon as Julia heard this, she breathed a sigh of relief. The girl decided that it would be okay to wait a few days, and then Grandma would take care of the household chores. Soon Leslie was discharged, and as before, the old woman took on her shoulders the housework. This fact did not escape Samantha's gaze, and she decided to talk to her mother. "Mom, you indulge Julia in everything, and you can't do that. She doesn't do anything around the house. Julia is not a 5-year-old child anymore, and she should help us too. I'm asking you not to do her chores for her. She'll have to do housework when she gets married, and now let her rest for the time being. Especially I have plenty of time. At least I will be useful in something," said the old woman. "You're wrong, Mom. Yes, realize that Julia will grow up selfish. You yourself once scolded me for spoiling her with gifts and things, and now you do the same thing. When I don't give her money for unfulfilled work, you give her money secretly from me. Samantha said tiredly. "Don't be angry. I will do as you say," said the old woman with a smile. Leslie died when Julia was in 11th grade. Samantha and her daughter were taking the loss of their loved one hard. The elderly woman was buried next to the grave of her late spouse. Samantha, during the burial, said to herself, "Here you are, Mom, and reunited with your loved one in heaven." After Leslie's passing, Samantha went through a difficult time in her life. Her late mother had previously helped her with finances from her pension, but now there was no place to wait for help, and Julia started asking for more and more money for daily expenses. Samantha tried to explain to the girl that she needed to reduce her requests a little. A month after the funeral, she received a phone call from Victoria, her class teacher, who immediately said, "I'd like to see you tomorrow at school. I'd like to see you at school tomorrow. It's about your daughter's behavior." "What's wrong?" Samantha asked excitedly. "It's a long story and not over the phone. If you have some free time at the moment, you can come to the school. I'll be here later today anyway," said the teacher. "I'll be at your place within the hour," Samantha said. The woman excused herself from work, then called a cab and drove to the school. On the way, she tried to call her daughter, but her phone was disconnected. Samantha felt that she was called for a reason and was very worried that her daughter had made a serious mess in the educational institution. And the woman was not mistaken in her speculations, as the teacher immediately said to Samantha when she met her, "I know that you've had a grief recently. I'm sorry for your loss. But I have some more unpleasant news to tell you. It's that today your daughter went through students' pockets in the locker room. The girl was caught red-handed by our cleaning lady. But this is not an isolated incident. The same incident happened a couple weeks ago. Julia was seen doing it by our counselor. We talked to your girl, and she promised it wouldn't happen again. I didn't tell you at that time, because I realized that you had just recently buried your mother, and it was very hard for you. Plus, I believed Julia that she wouldn't do it again. But, you see, it happened again. Now, I have to report this episode to our principal, but I don't want to do that. I want to help your daughter, but I can't do it without your help. Julia's going through puberty, and she could go down the wrong path, especially with a friend like Sarah." "Wait a minute. Sarah, who's 2 years older than Julia? But she is a decent girl. Her mother is still very sick, and she needed money for the operation," said Samantha quietly, who was stunned by the message of the class teacher. "Yes, I'm talking about this Sarah, only she was expelled from school for systematic truancy. She lives with her mother near me, and I see your daughter around Sarah a lot. But only this girl and her mother are in good health, except for the fact that the woman is a fan of strong drinks," said Victoria, and after a short pause continued, "And now you and I have to decide what to do next. Just understand now, she has already been caught twice by 2 people who work at the school. They will not spread about what happened. But the thing is that the parents of the students have already raised the issue at the meeting about the fact that from the pockets of their children are missing some values. And you realize the school's reputation is being damaged by that. And now imagine that Julia will be caught by a person who will not keep silent. It is not necessary to explain the situation further, so tell me how we will act," said the teacher. "Why do children leave valuables in their pockets?" Samantha asked a question and immediately scolded herself mentally for it. Victoria looked at her parent with a puzzled look when she heard the question. Samantha understood the look of the class teacher without words and immediately said, "I'm sorry, I'm just dizzy from what I've just learned. I can say from my side that I will talk to my daughter today. You see, I'm in a trance at the moment because I don't know what to do. I give my daughter money for small expenses, but within reasonable limits. But her demands are getting bigger and bigger every day. Maybe you can advise me something." Victoria looked at the visitor and said, "Let's do this. I will also talk to your daughter, as you did. And also, if you are advised, try to convince Julia to stop communicating with Sarah. And maybe a psychologist can help you, have a professional talk to the girl. Our school psychologist has already talked to Julia, but you see, our employee is very young, only the first year after college, and she has little experience yet. And you need someone with experience. Thank you so much. I don't know how to thank you. Samantha almost cried. The woman went home after school in a gloomy mood. She realized that simple persuasion would not help to set Julia on the right path. Samantha was at a loss as to how to influence her daughter to stop stealing and befriending Sarah, about whom there was a bad rumor. With these sad thoughts, the woman came home, and to her surprise, Julia was already there. The mother looked at her daughter with a testing look. The girl calmly endured the gaze and first asked a question. What has the class already told you fables about me? Stop sarcasm. Let's talk like adults. You're behaving in an unacceptable way. You lied to me and Grandma last year about the money you stole for the operation. Don't tell me that's what happened. I can tell you that I've heard about Sarah's mom. Daughter, realize that you're not only embarrassing yourself, you're embarrassing me. I was ashamed of what you did today. Today, you steal from school children, and tomorrow you'll go robbing stores? How can you not realize that this isn't going to end well? You need to get smart. You're not a stupid girl, so why do I have to spell it out for you? You think I'd enjoy giving you these moralizing lectures? I can answer that I don't like it at all. Now tell me something in return, said the woman, almost crying. I have nothing to say to you. I've already made it clear to you once that I lacked from you, but you didn't hear me, and now I don't want to tell you anything. And don't touch Sarah. She's a great girl and friend, said the girl to her mother. It seems to me that we speak different languages. I have a suggestion for you. Let me sign you up to a psychologist. You go to sessions with a specialist for a while. If you want, we'll go together, Samantha said. I'm not sick enough to go to a psychologist. Can I take it that we've reached the end of our educational conversation? Julia asked quietly. Do you promise me that you won't steal? Said her mother tiredly. Okay, Julia answered. After talking to her daughter, Samantha went to the bathroom, where the door was locked. It was only then that she let the tears flow. She tried to cry quietly so her daughter wouldn't hear. The woman didn't know at the moment if today's conversation had affected Julia's consciousness. And somewhere, with a woman's instinct, Samantha realized that the whole conversation was useless for her daughter. And at the same time, it dawned on her that tears would not help her, and she should talk to Sarah and insist that she stop talking to Julia. Samantha fulfilled her plan. The next day, she got the address of her daughter's friend from Victoria, and soon she met Sarah. The woman looked at the girl with a critical eye, noting that she looked like a vulgar person with bright makeup. Samantha forced herself not to give her daughter's friend a barbed remark about her appearance. Samantha said a friendly hello and introduced herself as Julia's mother. Sarah looked at the visitor with disdain and said, What do you want from me? What do you want from me? I have an unusual favor to ask of you. I'd like you to stop talking to Julia. You see, I don't mind you in general, but your friendship is having a negative effect on my daughter's behavior. I realize I may be saying things that are probably unpleasant for you. I don't know how to convince you that you shouldn't be friends with Julia. Just put yourself in my shoes. I think you too would only want your daughter to be happy. If this is offensive to you, I can suggest another option. Change your lifestyle for the better, said Samantha in a steady voice. Will you give me money to stop being friends with Julia? The girl said defiantly. You see how you talk to a woman who is old enough to be your mother. You address me as you without any preamble, and I address you as you, by the way. And now tell me, what can Julia learn from your intercourse? The woman spoke more sternly. I've had enough of school morals, so go on your way. Let Julia decide who she wants to socialize with. And now goodbye. And with these words, Sarah closed the front door in front of the uninvited guest. Samantha walked out of the entryway in a disgusted mood. The woman, when she went to the girl, thought that the conversation could still work. But now, after a couple of minutes of communication with Sarah, she realized that her daughter had befriended a boorish person who did not care about anyone from a high bell tower. When she got home, Samantha called out to Julia, but she wasn't home. The woman looked into her daughter's room and found it a mess, and she had asked Julia to clean it up from the night before. Samantha felt her anger towards her daughter boiling up inside her, and she only wanted to call Julia when the girl came home. The woman promptly jumped up to her daughter and was about to say everything as Julia shouted angrily, "Who'll ask you to go to Sarah's? I will now disregard your opinion too. How you treat me is how I treat you. How do you talk to your mother?" Samantha, who had never heard such a tone from her daughter before, was stunned. "Oh, what did you want? You think you're such a goody-goody in life. I know everything about you, how you gave birth to me from who knows who, and then slept with a man for money. And with your work, you completely forgot about me, about your life," said the girl angrily, and then quickly skipped to her room, and in a few minutes returned to her mother with a puffy notebook, which she handed to Samantha with the words, "Here you go and enjoy reading." It was Grandma who kept a diary and wrote down everything that happened to her daughter, which is you. It was interesting to read about you. I wasn't going to say anything to you. I kept it all to myself. But you crossed the line when you went to ask Sarah to stop talking to me and even offered her money for it. Samantha was in a daze after her daughter's statement and only said, "I did not offer Sarah money, but asked her to stop the friendship or change her attitude to life." After these words, the woman took the notebook from her daughter's hands and suddenly cried at the same moment. Samantha could not believe that all of what she had said had been said by her daughter. And Julia looked at her mother and grinned gloatingly and then ran out of the apartment. The girl was glad that she had finally found the strength to tell her mother everything. She was also helped by Sarah, who had said a lot of unpleasant things about her mother after the meeting with Samantha. It had been a couple of hours since Julia had had a fight with her mom and left the house. Samantha, who had already cried during this time, couldn't find a place for herself from worrying about her daughter. She repeatedly called Julia, but she didn't pick up the phone. The woman was out of her mind with worry. She also wondered why her mother kept this diary in which she described the events that concerned her daughter. Samantha only read a few entries in the notebook and realized that Julia was telling the truth because the diary contained this information in Leslie's handwriting. When the clock showed 10 o'clock in the evening, Samantha was in a panic as she didn't know where to look for her daughter. The woman quickly gathered herself and went to Sarah's house, but there she was opened by an elderly lady in an inebriated state who informed her that Sarah was not at home and she would return at an unknown time. Samantha stepped out of the entryway and had just taken a step when she slipped and fell. She tried to get up but felt unable to stand on her foot as she was pierced by a sharp pain in her ankle. The woman cried involuntarily and thought that today was completely filled with sorrowful events. Samantha tried to get up again, but as in the first case, she sank to the ground, which was covered with a crust of ice. A man who was walking his dog came to her aid. The stranger helped the woman to stand up while saying, "How are you so not careful? I have a car. I will now take you to the hospital, although I can assume that you have either a crack or a fracture of the ankle. Are you a doctor to give out diagnoses at a glance?" said the woman, almost crying. "I'm a paramedic, and my name is Byron," said the man, smiling. "I see," said Samantha, and tried to step on her sore foot, and then she cried out in pain. "No, this will not do," said the man and picked up the woman in his arms. Samantha wanted to be indignant at the stranger's prank, but she immediately stopped as she realized that she could not manage without help. Meanwhile, the stranger gently held the victim in his arms and walked towards his car, which was parked not far away. As soon as the man approached the car, he lowered Samantha gently onto the snow-covered ground with the words, "Let's get in the car and I'll take you to the hospital." After that, Byron helped the woman into the car in the front seat and then opened the back door and commanded the dog to jump in. Only then did he get behind the wheel himself. Along the way, Samantha gave her name and told him in a nutshell that she was looking for her daughter. The man drove the woman to the hospital, then made a call and 2 paramedics came out with a stretcher. Before Samantha was to be carried away, Byron asked her a question. "You are likely to be offered hospitalization. Do you intend to stay in the hospital?" "Absolutely not. I still have to find my daughter. You know that," Samantha said. "Then I'll wait for you and we'll solve your problem together." "Don't contradict me," the man said and signaled the orderlies to carry the woman. A short time later, Byron met Samantha, who had a cast on her leg. The man took Samantha in his arms again without any authorization and carried her to his car. And when he got behind the wheel, he said, "Dictate your daughter's number. I'll call you from my phone. Maybe Julia doesn't pick up when you call on purpose. Let's say she wants you to worry more. And she doesn't know my number, so she might pick up." Samantha dictated the numbers and watched with excitement as the new acquaintance dialed Julia's number. The girl answered immediately, and the man told her that her mom had a cast on and needed help. Julia anxiously asked where the mother was at the moment, and at the same moment Byron handed the phone to Samantha. The woman turned to her daughter excitedly. "Where are you? I've been worried sick about you. I'm at a friend's house. Don't worry about me. I will come in the morning," said the girl, and immediately disconnected the connection. Samantha wanted to reprimand her daughter, but the conversation was cut off by Julia herself. The woman looked at the phone, clutched in her hand, and suddenly burst into tears. Byron was confused and did not know how to calm the passenger. A few minutes passed before the man spoke. "You need to stop crying. Your tears won't help anything anyway. Let me take you home, and if you don't mind, I'll stay with you." "What about your family? Your relatives will be worried about you," said the woman without stopping crying. "The only family I have is my pug, who sleeps in the back seat. By the way, if you let me in, I will go only with my faithful friend. You know I can't leave him here," said the man. "Thank you for everything, and I agree to accept you too at this late hour," said the woman. Soon the couple was sitting in Samantha's living room. The woman herself, without knowing why, was telling about her life to the man she had met only a couple of hours ago. The man listened attentively to the interlocutor, and with every moment, he realized that he liked the landlady more and more. After a while, Samantha came to her senses and looked at her watch with an alarmed ouch. She apologized to her guest and wondered if she was holding him up. Byron laughed in response and said that he was glad for the delay because he was a guest of the most beautiful woman in the world. Samantha was embarrassed and said, "Don't make me blush. Don't make me blush like a schoolgirl. You're right about the naughty part. You really are a naughty girl," the man said seriously. "Are we already on a first-name basis?" Samantha said, puzzled. The man was silent in response. He only stared at the woman. The landlady felt naked under this gaze, so she couldn't stand it and asked, "You said that I had done something wrong, and in what way?" "You made the lonely heart of the paramedic beat much stronger," quietly said the man. "I understand you. You want to tell me that I am a woman of easy behavior because I let a strange man in at night. And now you have decided that with beautiful words you can put me in bed for pleasure. Did I understand everything correctly?" Hostile note. "So understand correctly that I am not your enemy, but your friend. Your mum's being counseled at the moment. And who told you that I'm going to communicate with you?" The girl said pompously. "And you have no other way out, because I'm taking over your mother's patronage and, at the same time, and you. Someone has to cover your night out," Byron said with a smile. Julia grinned and went to her room. Samantha wanted to yell at the guest, but the man gestured for the landlady to be quiet, and then the guest muttered that it was useless to scold her daughter now. The woman looked perplexed at the interlocutor, and he in turn said that now it was necessary to communicate more with Julia. Samantha flared up after these words and asked the man to leave the apartment. Byron, with a smile, took the replica of the woman he liked and said that he would visit Samanda in the near future. As soon as the guest left, Samanda called her daughter and lectured her for a long time on raised tones, and the girl looked indifferently at her mother. The woman felt that everything she said for Julia was parallel. At last, Samanda said, "If there is one remark from the school, then believe me, I will find a way to punish you. I can also tell you that there are special boarding schools for troubled teenagers, so I could overcome myself and send you there, so that they can teach you some sense." "I know what you mean. There is a fiancé, then from the daughter must get rid of," mockingly said Julia, and closing the door to her room through her mother. "Good idea, go ahead." Samanda clenched her fists powerlessly. She wanted to spank her daughter on her soft spot, but she realized that this method of upbringing was no longer suitable. The woman lay down. She tried to calm down, but it was not possible. Samanda fell asleep only in the morning. When the woman woke up, her daughter was already gone. Samanda looked at the clock. At this moment, Julia should have a break, and she decided to call Julia, but the girl dropped the call. And just a few minutes later, Samanda received a call from the class teacher informing her that Julia had stolen a cell phone from a junior high school student, and there were witnesses to the act. Samanda was stunned by this news. She told the teacher that she couldn't come to school. Victoria pronounced that she knew about the broken ankle. The teacher also said that the theft case would not be considered at the pedagogical council, and Julia would be registered at the children's police station. After the conversation, Samanda sat down and cried. She did not know how to get in touch with her daughter. The woman was lost in guessing in what period of time she had missed the upbringing of her child, and Samanda called an anonymous center of psychological help out of desperation. "Who are you to tell me what I do or don't do? I see you for the second time in my life to listen to your reproaches. So we'll see each other every day from now on. What's the problem?" "I'm moving here to live with you," said the guest with a smile. "What kind of impudent statement is that?" the woman said in confusion. "We're adults. If you didn't like me, you would have told me to get out right away, but you didn't. But if you want me to hit on you for a couple of weeks, I'll do it. But realize how much precious time we'll lose," the man said. "You're really crazy. Get out and never come to me again," exclaimed the woman, and at the same moment was silent as Byron embraced her and kissed her passionately on the lips. And then the man left, leaving a note with his phone number on the nightstand. The woman pressed her palm to her lips after Byron left and smiled involuntarily. At that moment, she wished the man had left, as she wished the man had continued to kiss her. Samanda picked up the piece of paper and twirled it thoughtfully before her eyes. 2 weeks had passed since Byron had left, and the man had not made himself known. The woman thought about him often and found herself wishing she could see him every day. The relationship with her daughter was strained. Julia tried not to talk to her mother too much. Soon Samanda's cast was removed, and she was on her way home from the hospital when the phone rang. It was the class teacher calling. Samanda immediately tensed up internally, and not in vain, as the teacher informed her that Julia had fought with a classmate and broken her index finger. The parents of the victim are going to file a petition in court against Julia's mother, who negligently brings up her daughter, since the child behaves like that. Victoria advised Samanda to go to the girl and try to settle the conflict. Samanda thanked the educator for the call and disconnected the connection. The woman took a cab and went to the victim's house. Samanda immediately asked for herself and her daughter to apologize to the girl and her parents. And then the woman said, "I realize that my daughter has committed a terrible act and it is impossible to turn a blind eye to it. But I have a compelling request to you not to file an application to the court. Let me give you some money in the form of compensation for moral harm. Understand me correctly. I do not want publicity in this case." The parents of the victim named the amount they would like to have and asked Samanda to talk strictly with her daughter, as they will not tolerate such behavior for the second time. The woman tearfully promised that she would talk to Julia today, after which she once again thanked the owners of the apartment for everything. Samantha returned home in a depressed state. Her way passed through the apartment building where a friend of her daughter lived. The woman looked gloomily at the entrance where Sarah lived. She blamed her daughter's friend for all her troubles. Samantha mentally imagined how she would like to reprimand the girl now. The woman was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't immediately hear someone calling her name. Samantha turned to the side and saw Byron, who was walking with a dog. The man approached her and said, "I see you are in a foul mood again. I wish I could admire your smile and never see you cry. You know, and I'm so glad to see you, but you disappeared and never gave any news about yourself," said the woman sadly. "You had my phone number, and you could have called me at any time of the day or night, and I would have come right away. I have a proposition for you. Let's go to my place. I'm having a little party tonight, and I don't want to celebrate alone," Byron said. "What kind of celebration?" the woman asked quietly. "It was to celebrate a paramedic's length of service. I've been a paramedic for 20 years, he said with a smile. "Wow, such an event is not a sin to celebrate. But I don't have a present," Samantha said. "For me, the gift is you. Now let's go to my place," said the man cheerfully. And now the couple sat in Byron's one-room apartment. The man put in front of the guest a vase with sweets, as well as a small purchased cake and poured tea. They were sitting and talking peacefully when Samantha suddenly asked, "I don't understand one thing. Why do you live without a soulmate? After all, you are handsome, not old, tactful in communication. I was married and have a grown-up son who went abroad to live. With my wife divorced more than 8 years ago. At one time I loved her very much, and she cheated on me. Then I took offense at the whole world and gave myself completely to work, excluding from his life of the fair sex, but up to a certain point. And you know what it was?" said the landlord quietly. "I don't know," said the woman, who guessed perfectly well what her interlocutor was talking about. And at the same moment, Byron stood up, approached the guest, and then bent down and said in a hoarse voice, "Then I'll remind you now," and with these words he kissed Samantha. And then there were hot kisses, passionate embraces. It was not until some time later that they broke away from each other. Samantha lay on her lover's shoulder and stroked the man's cheek with the palm of her hand. Byron looked at the woman and spoke, "I feel very good with you. Even then, when you fell unsuccessfully lifted in my arms, I realized that I want to carry you like this all the time. And you offer it to me, and you will know my answer," the woman said with a smile. "Let's never be apart again," Byron said. "I'd love to, but you know how much trouble I'm having with my daughter. Julia would blame me if we got back together. I paid a lot of money today to get this phone thing out of the way. Sometimes I think she does it on purpose to make me mad," she said sadly. "I'll take care of Julia, but you have to change a lot of things about her too. You need to realize that house for the night. You're talking nonsense. You're not bringing a man to sleep over. You're bringing a man you love to live with you. That's the right way to put it," Byron said softly and kissed his beloved. Soon the couple was sitting in Samantha's apartment talking. The woman was visibly nervous and glanced at her watch. Byron saw all this and asked his beloved not to worry. Samantha nodded nervously in response, but continued to worry. And then the front door opened and Julia, who didn't know that her mother wasn't alone in the apartment, came in. The girl from the threshold shouted, "Mom, I tell you at once that you do not read me lectures about stealing, or else otherwise I will leave the house. The sweet child came home, and we are waiting for you to drink tea and celebrate my holiday. And by the way, I'm not going to lecture you. I'm just going to have a heart-to-heart talk with you," Byron said. The girl entered the hall and looked at the man perplexed, and then she looked at her mother, who was sitting with her eyes down to the floor. Julia then turned to the man. "Let's have a conversation, but I will also tell you that if I don't like it, I will leave here immediately." Byron smiled and said that he wanted to talk to the girl alone. Julia at first wanted to resent the suggestion, but then changed her mind and waved her hand toward her room. The couple secluded themselves. The man, as soon as they were alone, spoke. "Let's do the following. First, I will live from this day with you. Second, I and your mom will soon become husband and wife, and this means that I love your mom and will not give her an offense. Thirdly, from this day forward, you will stop stealing and generally behaving inappropriately. I, for my part, pledge to treat you with understanding and respect, and in doing so, I'd also want to be your friend. How's that sound? Isn't that a lot to take on, Uncle? When you pay, then we'll talk." Julia said with a sneer and then added, "You have to pay for pleasure. And if you want to sleep with my mom, you have to shut your stepdaughter's mouth with bills. You sound like a local thug, but I can live with that. We'll agree on finances, but you stick to my 3 points, how to behave," said the man, and just wanted to leave as he turned and added, "And you should not call me uncle. It sounds vulgar from your lips, but Byron, and address me on you will be just right. By the way, I came here with my dog. His name is Walter. He loves to be petted." Byron left Julia's room and walked towards Samantha, who was staring at him questioningly. The man stroked the woman's hand and pronounced that Julia knew about everything and that she would change from this day forward. Samantha looked at her lover incredulously, and he only winked at her in response. The next day, Byron left for work early in the morning and kissed his lover before leaving. Only behind the man closed the front door as Julia ran up to her mother and asked when she had time to seduce this paramedic. Samantha cringed at her daughter's words like a toothache and asked Julia to choose her words. Julia only laughed mockingly in response. A couple of days later, Samantha and her lover filed an application in the registry office. The woman was happy because next to her was her favorite person and her daughter became more malleable. However, the idyll in the family did not last long. Already after Byron and Samantha signed, then Julia declared herself. The girl began to demand more and more money from her mother's husband. The man gave at first within reasonable limits, but then her appetite for finances increased, and he told her that he would receive pocket money every day, but in smaller amounts. Julia's reaction to this announcement was lightning fast. She didn't come home for the night. Samantha roared all night, and when her daughter showed up in the morning, gave her a huge scandal. She slapped her in the face. Julia only laughed in response, and then suggested that the mother to talk about this topic with her husband. A few years later, Julia finished 11 grades. During this time, Samantha and her husband repeatedly blushed for the girl's actions at pedagogical councils, on the Commission on Juvenile Affairs, as well as in front of the parents of the affected students. Samantha repeatedly tried to talk to her daughter to educate her. Often the woman did not hold back and went to shouting during explanatory conversations. Byron at such times tried to pacify his beloved and not to shout at Julia. The man wanted the girl to express why she behaves like this, but the stepdaughter refused to contact him in a friendly way. And so the day before her 18th birthday, the girl appealed to her stepfather with a request that he give a round sum of money. The man asked what exactly, and Julia voiced the figure. Byron, having heard with surprise, whistled and said, "Your appetite, dear lady, has grown by leaps and bounds. May I ask what kind of business you need so much money for? After all, on this amount you can live at least a couple of months without needing anything. Do you care? It's my birthday, and I want to celebrate it in a big way after all. Not every day you celebrate such a date," said the girl. "But I don't have that much money. I could offer you only a third. I understand that it's your birthday, but you have to balance your income and expenses," the man said. Julia snorted in response and waited for her mother to come home from work to talk about it. As soon as Samantha came and recognized her daughter's request, she immediately gave a negative answer, as she did not have such finances. a scandal broke out between the mother and Julia first called her mother a foul word and slapped her on the cheek, and then locked herself in her room. Samantha, who had not expected this turn of events, sat in the hall crying. In such a state, the woman was caught by her husband, who went out during the conversation on business. He hugged his beloved and asked about the reason for the tears. Byron frowned, because Julia had never allowed herself to raise a hand on her mother before. He went to his stepdaughter's room and knocked on the door. The girl replied that she had no desire to talk to any of the household. The next day, Samantha got up and saw that her daughter was no longer at home. The woman was surprised at this, as Julia had been sleeping practically until lunchtime lately after school, and here she was gone. Samantha walked into the room and noted, as always, that her daughter had left a mess in the room, and then noticed a white sheet taped to the dresser. She walked over and read the message, which was written in Julia's hand. "You will regret everything." Samantha shuddered to think what else Julia might do. The woman went into the living room and suddenly noticed that one door of the sideboard was not closed. Puzzled, she walked over and opened the door wider and immediately noticed that the jewelry box was ajar. Samantha took the box in her hands and found that the black gold cross that Byron had given her was missing. It was a piece of jewelry he had inherited from his grandmother. She then asked him why he had not given the cross to his first wife, and he jokingly replied that he was saving the jewelry for her, and now the jewel was gone. The woman sank powerlessly to the floor. She realized that her daughter had taken the cross in revenge for her not giving her the money. Samantha did not know how to tell her husband about it now when he woke up, but it was necessary to speak. The woman tried to call her daughter, but the caller was out of range. Samantha dialed and dialed Julia, and soon Byron woke up and saw his wife sitting on the floor. He walked over to his wife and said affectionately, "Why are you sitting here all alone? I don't know how to tell you about it. My daughter stole from us." And with these words, the woman sobbed. "What are you talking about?" said the head of the family in bewilderment. "Julia has taken the cross and is not answering the phone," Samantha said through her tears. "Oh, that's what it is. Stop crying. Let's hope that the money from selling the jewelry will be enough for her and she won't do something stupid. You know very well that you would have inherited this cross to your daughter in the future anyway. Just consider that you did it in advance," the man said to his wife and hugged her tenderly. Byron understood that now his wife felt guilty about her daughter's deed, and he didn't want her to feel guilty for something she hadn't done. Julia hadn't been home for 2 days. Samantha was tormented by the thought that something bad had happened to her daughter. She tried not to let her husband see her tears, but Byron saw the red eyes of his wife and understood the reason for it. He supported her as best he could, trying to cheer her up. And on the 3rd day, Samantha received a call from the police informing her that her daughter had been arrested for robbing a store and was detained on a hot trail. The woman was at home at that moment and only heard the news and sat down quietly on a chair. She couldn't believe what the stranger had just said on the phone. Samantha would have been happy to cry, but there were no tears at all. She felt a kind of numbness. Soon her husband came home from work and saw the detached look in her eyes. Byron asked the woman worriedly, "What happened, my love?" Samantha looked at her husband and spoke quietly. "The police called and said that Julia robbed the store. What will happen now? Will she go to jail? How could something like that happen? What should we do?" The man looked at his wife dumbfounded. He had not expected such news and was at a loss. It took a few minutes before Byron could gather his thoughts and tell his wife to calm down. The head of the family thought about what they could do in this situation. But looking at the time, he realized that at the beginning of the 9th night, they would not be able to solve any problems. He hugged his wife and quietly said, "Let me give you a sedative now, and you go to bed. Understand, my dear, that now we are not able to do anything." It is necessary to wait for the morning and only then to act. But to be honest, I do not know what to do. I promise we'll do something anyway. The next day, Byron and his wife went to the police, where they learned all the details from the investigator. Samantha asked the man in uniform to let her daughter go free, and as if in a trance, repeated that she was ready to give a lot of money for it. The investigator saw that the woman was in a state of affect and advised Byron to take his wife home. A couple days passed, and Samantha learned that she and her spouse could do nothing to help Julia. The investigator was only able to authorize a visit with Julia. Samantha cried tears and told her daughter, "What have you done? You've ruined your life." "It's too late for tears, Mom. You couldn't get your only child out of jail, then disappear from my life forever. I don't want to see you," she said in a mocking tone. After these words of her daughter, Samantha silently stood up and then looked sadly at Julia and said, "As you say, my dear, I will not trouble you anymore." So there was a trial, which was attended only by Byron, and Samantha flatly refused to be present at the sentencing. The girl was given 4 years in prison. Julia's mother learned about this from her husband. The woman silently listened to her husband and did not say anything in response. Byron at that time thought that the wife was in shock, so such an indifferent reaction to the sentence. However, time passed and Samantha completely refused to talk to her husband about her daughter. Byron tried to dissolve his beloved, saying that it is necessary July to write to the prison and support the girl behind the barbed wire. But in response, the husband heard only one thing: "Stop reminding me of her. I'm honoring her request. Let's please don't talk about this topic, as I don't want to. Just don't rub it in my face." It's been a year since Julia was sent to prison. Samantha had steadfastly refused to talk about her daughter all that time, and Byron had stopped bothering his wife with reminders of Julia. He did not want to cause her mental anguish, as he saw that as soon as they started talking about Julia, Samantha became nervous and he had to give her a sedative. However, Samantha did not understand in the past year why her husband had 2 business trips for professional development, and she suspected her husband of adultery. And it also became a reason that Byron started taking extra shifts at night. Samantha couldn't take it anymore and asked him point blank, "Did you get another woman on the side? What makes you say that? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Can you even explain why you made such conclusions?" Bewildered husband asked, "I'm not a stupid woman, and your night duty, which you are constantly taking, I have certain thoughts. You do not find it a significant evidence in your cheating," said the spouse. "Are you crazy? Honey, I don't need anyone but you. Why are you talking nonsense?" "Yes, damn, I'm trying to earn money on purpose, so that we with you to go to the sea to relax, and you're making up such a thing here," said the husband. The woman, after these words, sighed with relief. She was actually afraid that her lover has taken a mistress on the side. And when the man said that he was saving money for a trip to the sea, she was relieved. Several years passed, and Samantha asked her spouse about the fact that he still takes extra shifts, and they still have not gone anywhere on vacation. The man hugged his chosen one in response and pronounced that the trip was cancelled due to his illness. The wife only heard about the indisposition of the chosen one, as immediately became alarmed. She immediately asked a bunch of questions to her husband. However, the man stopped the eloquent flow of the chosen one and said, "Why are you so worried? A simple ailment, and do not need to now so immediately think about the bad. Give me time and everything will be normal. I just need to lie down in the hospital and improve my health. Wait, are you suspecting me of adultery again? Oh, you naughty girl. Tell me the truth about yourself. I beg you," with tears in her eyes, said the woman, who was afraid of losing her loved one. And in response, she heard Byron's words, "My darling, I'm all right. You do not worry, but I have a serious conversation with you. I know you don't want to talk about your daughter because you're in a shell, but it's time to crawl out of it. Realize that Julia is your own child, and has made mistakes in her life, and more than one, but she needs to be given a chance. You have to meet her. That's out of the question. Do you want us to have a big fight? I don't feel like it, Samantha said dryly. Well, my dear, we will not talk about it today, Byron said humbly. He hoped to have a conversation with his wife about her daughter. The man was disappointed that his wife was once again taking the conversation on the subject in stride. He knew he didn't have much time left to reconcile mother and daughter. A little over 2 months after that conversation, Byron passed away from brain cancer. This was a big blow to Samantha, as her husband was well aware of his illness and had kept it from her. She learned about it from her husband's colleagues, who reported that her husband asked her not to inform her about the disease in any case, as he was worried about her condition. This circumstance most of all rubbed her soul, because the loved one knew that he was dying and worried about her. When the funeral took place, Samantha sobbed in despair. The woman could not believe that now she was left alone, without her loved one. She watched the coffin being lowered into the pit and wanted only one thing at that moment, to be near her husband. After the funeral, a couple of days passed and the woman, having visited the grave, came home, as suddenly felt that there was someone in the apartment. She herself did not know where this premonition came from. She went through the rooms, but there were no traces. Samantha scolded herself mentally for being suspicious. However, the feeling that someone had been in the apartment did not let go, and the woman decided to check the spare keys to the apartment, which she and her husband kept in the chest of drawers. And then Samantha noticed that they were missing. The woman was well aware that the deceased husband, if he had taken a duplicate, would have informed her about it. Samantha was terrified, because the keys couldn't just disappear. So someone had stolen them. The woman immediately wondered who had done it and why, because she and her late husband, if they had a small savings, it was on a card. She immediately decided to change the lock in the apartment. And the very next day, when she got to work, she took the day off. The woman hurried home, as she had already contacted a specialist who was to change her lock that day. When Samantha approached the door of her apartment, she noticed that the doormat was lying crooked. This alerted the woman, and she carefully opened the front door. Samantha entered the apartment and suddenly froze with horror as she saw her own daughter rummaging through her things. All the woman could manage to say was, "Julia," and with these words she lost consciousness. Samantha woke up some time later. Her daughter was sitting beside her, her eyes reddened with tears. Julia quietly said, "I'm sorry, Mom, but we need to talk. Are you able to do that now, or should I call for an ambulance?" "Date, how did you get here?" Barely audible mother said. "I have a lot to tell you, but please let me speak," Julia said. "I'm listening to you," Samantha said, still not understanding what was happening. "Mom, I'm very sorry to you, but it's not about that now. Your husband was a wonderful man, and I'm ashamed that I treated you and him like a pig after I sent you away. But you remember that Uncle Byron didn't leave me. He came to see me once every 6 months, and he told you that he was going on a refresher course, and he took extra shifts on duty, and again to bring me a package to the prison. Your spouse, I know, tried to reconcile us, because he repeatedly offered me to write to you, but I had a grudge against you since childhood, and I told him about it. I told him that you put your job ahead of me, and that you did. Don't argue with me now, because I'll explain it to you later. Eventually, I got out of detention and Byron came to my rescue. He offered to let me live in his apartment. I had no other choice, as I didn't want to go to you. And soon I met a man I fell in love with and got pregnant and then gave birth. That's when I found out about Byron's illness, and he strictly ordered me not to tell you. Mom, your husband loved you very much. I envied you, to tell you the truth. That's when I realized when I gave birth to my son and named him after Byron, I realized what a mother is and how I hurt you unfairly all that time. Wait, Julia, how did you get here? How did you get the keys? What are you looking for here?" Samantha said incomprehensibly to her daughter. Julia looked at her mother with excitement and wanted to continue talking, but she couldn't because she cried and knelt down in front of her mother with the words, "You forgive me. I am so guilty before you. I don't know how to apologize to you. It's just that Byron gave me the keys and told me before he passed away that in one of your books he left me and my son money, and he also took a promise from me that I would make peace with you. But I was afraid, so I came in here sneaking away from you, but you came in early from work today. I didn't expect this meeting myself as I wasn't prepared for it." Julia paused with these words. Samantha listened to her daughter's last words in silence and then lifted Julia from her knees and cried, as she had just realized that her husband, being seriously ill and noting that he had not long to live, was trying to reconcile her with her daughter. The woman realized that Byron loved her sincerely and she had doubted him for nothing. This realization pressed Samantha the most, and at the same moment, she suddenly realized another thing as well, that she was now a grandmother. The woman only managed to utter, "Where is my grandson? Where is Byron? Mom, do you forgive me?" Julia said with tears in her eyes, "Oh, be quiet, daughter, of course. I've wasted so much time. How old is my grandson?" Samantha said quietly, "He is 2 years old, and he has seen his grandfather Byron," the young woman said. "I want to see him," Samantha said and added, "Did you find the money Byron told you about?" "No, I don't remember your favorite book. Uncle Byron told me it was in your favorite book," Julia said. "I know what edition it's in. Take the book, Singing in the Blackthorns, Byron, and I used to read it together," the woman said. Julia hugged her mother. Only now she realized how much she missed her mother and how much she missed her. The young woman could barely hold back the tears that had come again. Julia wanted at this moment to make her mother understand how remorseful she was for her behavior, and Samantha, sensing her daughter's condition, asked, "Now you know what it is to be a mom. Will you make my mistake? After all, once I gave myself to work simply, forgetting about you, and did not give that proper communication, which I should have given to my own child. Mom, I learned a good lesson, but I'll be honest, it was thanks to Uncle Byron. I'm happy for you and I hope that you and I will never be at odds again." Samantha said and then asked, "Is the father of your child with you?" "He is my boy, just like I am your daughter. He and I broke up before Byron was born, and I'm grateful for that, because he's not much of a father. Now, why don't we go get Byron? He can't stay without his mom for long. I left him with a friend. And now, when he finds out that he has a grandmother, he'll be happy because he's a loving kid," Julia said. "What are you talking about? Sure, let's go." "Daughter, I love you very much. I'm sorry for everything," said Samantha. "Mom, I'm sorry too. I've made a lot of mistakes. And I'm grateful that you had a wonderful man in your life, whom you loved and he loved you, and who made me understand what love is," said Julia, looking fondly at her mother.